be here today, and I want to thank the youth for last week's basket, and I want everyone to know that I shared with it. But I don't know what's in this one, so I may not share it. I appreciation, thank you. It's so good to see Kim and Gary. They came all the way from California just to be with us. And you know what? We're going to have a wonderful time tomorrow, and I hope you're coming to visit us some more. Thank you. It's going to be an awesome service because Dick was an awesome Christian man. It's going to be good. We're going to celebrate. Heaven gained a saint. Anyway, this morning, I want to speak about Daniel and the lion's den. So once in a while, smile so I don't think you're roaring at me. Satan, he roars like a lion. And he makes you think that he has you in his den. But you know what? God will bring us all out in victory if we remain faithful to him. Every child that's been to Sunday school or children's church has probably heard of the wonderful story of Daniel and the lion's den. Does everybody here know that story? Good, good. It'll help the sermon. It's a story of God's great grace and power to deliver us through the most trying of circumstances. Have you ever felt like you were in a lion's den? I think all of us have. Maybe you're in one now. But Daniel, he was now getting old. He had served in the administrations of 2 former kings, and he was now still in exile down in Babylon. He was away from his homeland of Israel. And a new king named Darius had risen to the throne of the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel had already served under King Nebuchadnezzar, and he'd proven to be a faithful servant, even as a young man. Good old Nebuchadnezzar, he'd been impressed by Daniel's ability to interpret dreams, and through Daniel's explanation of the earthly kingdoms that would rise, he found favor and was given a position of authority in the Babylonian kingdom. But then, Daniel's fortune changed quickly. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was overthrown by the Persian king by the name of Cyrus. And under Cyrus, Daniel remained strong in his faith. He remained faithful. And then old Cyrus passed on the scene, and a new king was on the throne by the name of Darius. Daniel 6 says, "It pleased King Darius to appoint 120 satraps or princes throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage." Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. And that's when the problems began. Daniel was an old man. He'd probably be in his 80s by now, maybe even older than that. But his life had proven his faithfulness to his God. No one could find a fault in him. Who better to trust than a man whose entire life has been an example of faithfulness and honesty? So King Darius wanted to promote Daniel. But his advisors were jealous of Daniel, and they started to plot against him. I guess they wanted to impeach him. Has there ever been a time in your life that you expected God's best because of your faithfulness? We all think sometimes, you know, God, I'm not worthy of anything, but I've done my best. Could you please send a blessing my way? And I ask, do you think there's anything wrong with such a prayer? I don't think so. I don't think so, because Paul tells us it's not wrong to want God's blessing. In fact, look at what he had to say in 1 Corinthians 12. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all workers of miracles? Have all the gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? But covet, want earnestly the best gifts, until I show you a more excellent way. You see, like Daniel, we should desire to be used in a greater way by God. It's not wrong to desire more. It's not wrong to want a higher position, to seek more authority. But it becomes a sin when those things take the place of seeking the will of God to get what we want. When Daniel dared to stick his head above the crowd and allow God to elevate him, he placed himself in a dangerous position. You see, Satan doesn't want us to amount to anything. He'd just as soon allow you to stay quiet and poor and broken and powerless right where you are. After all, if you try to achieve anything more, you become a greater threat to the kingdom of hell. Daniel's life has been described as faithful. He was known for his service to the Lord. So when he stuck his head above the crowd, the sneaking, conniving, underhanded, low-down, cheating devil began to plot against him. But I like what it says. No one could find anything to accuse him of, which made them hate him even more. You see, politics, in case you didn't know this, I thought I'd bring this up, is a hard game to play. No matter what public office you run for, the opponent's going to do his best to dig up a little dirt if he can. Paralegals go to work and phone calls are made. Interviews are held with anyone and everyone that you may have known, even casually. They're trying to dig up something that will discredit you and might even cost you the election. And that's what was happening to Daniel here. The other leaders all plotted against him, and they forced King Darius to make a decree that the king would soon regret. Have you ever been around someone with a silver tongue? I mean, someone who could talk their way out of anything or into anything? That's an earmark of a good politician. King Darius listened closely as his court praised him and made him feel really good. The flattering tongues of his officers persuaded him that he was more than who he really was. He began to think of himself as a god, a man above the law. He was king, and he could make any law that he wanted to. And he wanted all the people to bow down to him. And having that kind of power seems like it could be good. But in that position, we better watch what we say, or it will come back to haunt us. Once that law was spoken into existence, it could never, ever be repealed. Luke 6:26 says, "Woe unto you when all men shall speak well of you." King Darius would have been better off if he had heard that before he spoke the law into existence. But you know what? Daniel didn't let the king's law bother him at all. He was determined to stay faithful to his God at all costs. He could have made up some pretty good excuses. Well, you know, it's just for 30 days. What would have hurt for that short period of time to not pray openly? I'll just be a Secret Service saint for 30 days. I have to think of how much good I've done to date. Is it really worth losing all that influence for just a 30-day time period? And Daniel must have thought after Darius' speech, God put me here. After all, aren't we supposed to obey the laws of the land? And I'm sure God will understand if I don't pray publicly. I'll just do it quietly. If I pray, then I won't be able to help others later. But you see, Daniel wouldn't accept excuses from anyone, especially from himself. He determined to do his duty to God, no matter what the cost. In our way of thinking, we'd say, Lord, I've been faithful and I'm continuing to be faithful. Doesn't that give you the opportunity to really bless me and to keep me from having any problems? Wouldn't that be nice? But it wasn't going to be that way for Daniel, and it won't be for you and I either. Faithfulness helps to obtain the promises, but it doesn't guarantee us against the troubles. Did you get that? Faithfulness helps us to obtain the promises, but it doesn't guarantee us against the troubles. Now Darius had painted himself into a corner because of his pride and ego. He wanted everyone to bow down to him. And Daniel painted himself into a corner because of his faithfulness. And both would have to pay a price for their actions. And I want you to know that good old Satan is always working to trap God's people. If he can't get you to fall or to fail in your faithful service, he'll keep finding ways to try to silence you. He knows that if he can just silence us, then all the good that we've done will come to nothing in the end. The Christian life is one of faithfulness and commitment. But if we aren't careful, we can lose the reward of that life by stopping our faithfulness and commitment even when we're inside of the gates of heaven. It has to continue to the end to be truly faithful. And that good old devil knows that all of your good things can be lost in the end. And if that happens, he wins. He wins. There was a story in a newspaper some time ago about a burglar in Gastonia, North Carolina. He broke into an apartment where he washed all the dishes, mopped the kitchen floor, scrubbed the bathtubs, and rearranged all the furniture very neatly. Some of us might want to leave our doors unlocked, huh? But all the good things came to nothing when he walked out with the stereo equipment, TV, jewelry, and everything else of value that he could carry. All the good that he did was quickly forgotten because of the bad that he did later. 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And because of the trap of the devil, Daniel was thrown into a literal lion's den. But I think we often find ourselves in a spiritual lion's den. I can imagine that the politicians that framed him, oh, they were jumping for joy. Their plan had worked beautifully, and the king was such a pushover. I can hear them snickering all the way back to Washington. The devil thinks that he has you trapped too. When you're locked away in a prison cell of doubt and fear, when you're facing troubles as never before, and when you lose faith or lose sight of what God is doing, and then you cower in fear at the devil's roaring. Good old Satan's plan is really working. But you see, it's not over till it's over. Oh, it seems hopeless. As Daniel was let down into that den, I wonder if he thought that was the end of him too. At that point, he didn't know that God was going to save him from the lions. And I'm sure that many more before him had met their death there in the lion's den. What would stop it from happening now? Daniel prayed 3 times a day in the open. But I can imagine that he prayed now like never before. Because impending disaster always sends us to our knees in more earnest prayer. It was crunch time for Daniel. 1 more minute, and he might be the lion's happy meal. But you know, a funny thing happens. The lions, they weren't hungry. They just laid there and ignored Daniel. Maybe God made it where they couldn't see Daniel. Maybe God made them feel full. Maybe Daniel just wasn't appetizing enough. You see, he was an old man, and so maybe he would look just too tough to chew. But whatever the reason, they didn't even lick him or take a nibble. Daniel went down into that den, and he spent the night with the lions while the king paced the floor. And I'm sure he prayed for forgiveness and for protection over Daniel. But I could just see Daniel down there in that lion's den along about midnight, when the darkness of the night was at its worst. I could see Daniel reaching over, fluffing up the lion's mane to make him a better pillow. Come on, Jack, get your paw out from under my back and your tail out of my face so I can sleep. Oh, and by the way, you fellows could really use a good hosing down tomorrow. And for goodness sake, brush your teeth. I don't know what you've been chewing on, but your breath smells like a dead skunk. Now, I don't know if that's what really went down, but nevertheless, he slept with the lions, and he made it through the night. So let that give you hope in all your situations to keep on being faithful in spite of all your circumstances. God hasn't finished with you yet. He has a plan for your life. Satan may have you in his trap for now, but look up. The day is coming when you'll have the last laugh on him. You have to be like Daniel and be persistent in your prayer life. You need to be persistent in your faithfulness to Almighty God. And you need to be persistent in your trust in him. You have to keep moving forward and never turn and run. Forward. Never look back. Australia has 2 animals pictured on their coat of arms. They are an emu and a kangaroo. Now these are some strange choices to those who don't know why they're there. That emu is nothing but a big dumb bird. And a kangaroo just looks funny while it hops along to escape danger. But there's more to it than that. You see, these 2 animals have a very special characteristic that isn't found in any other species. It is impossible for them to move backwards. An emu has 3 toes, and they're all on the front of his foot. If he tries to move backward, he'll fall down. A kangaroo can't move backwards because its long and heavy tail gets in the way and trips him up. So they both must move forward all the time. And so they were picked to symbolize Australia as a nation that will never ever fall back, but keep moving on against all odds. Now, would Daniel have been made a ruler under King Darius if he had stopped being faithful and stopped praying? I don't think he would have. I think he would have still been thrown into the lion's den. and probably would have been killed then. So I want to ask you this morning, will you finish this race of life as a winner if you fail to remain faithful? No, you'll lose the rewards in the end, I think. Even if the finish line is in sight, you have to keep on running with all your might and never, ever give up. It was March 5th, 1987. An Irish world record holder in the 1,500 meter dash was running a qualifying heat at the World Indoor Track Championship in Indianapolis. With just 2.5 laps to go, he tripped and he fell. But he got up and with great effort managed to catch the leaders of the race once again. And with only 20 yards left in the race, he was now in 3rd place. And that would be good enough to qualify for the finals. He turned to his left to see if anyone was coming close behind him. And when he didn't see anyone, he slowed his pace just a little. After all, his place in the finals was in the bag. But what he didn't see was a runner coming up fast on his right there on the outside lane. And in the last few yards of the race, that runner passed him and took 3rd place, bumping him out of the finals completely. Just one moment of relaxing his race cost him a chance at the championship. Don't be tempted to quit at the end of your race. Keep on running with patience the race that's set before you, because there's a crown of life waiting at the end. Don't let Satan cheat you out of it. The prize is already yours. All you have to do is finish. That finish line is in sight. It's close. Jesus is coming soon. And you might feel like Satan has you in his lion's den, but with God, he's a toothless lion. All he can do is roar. He can't do anything that God doesn't allow him to do. So just let him roar. But you keep on serving the Lord and being faithful. Satan's mouth will soon be forever shut in the end. Lord, thank you for the story, the true story of Daniel in the lion's den. Lord, I remember having that story many years ago. And Lord, you protected him because of his faithfulness. And I know there's people here going through it right now, Lord. They're tempted to give up. They don't understand. But Lord, the prize is waiting for them. Dick never gave up. Fran never gave up. Richard never gave up. Betty never gave up. And their reward is big, Lord. I thank you for that. Help us to remain faithful to you, Lord, through everything. We know that Satan's out there, Lord, but he can't do anything to us as long as we have you in our life. Bless the remaining part of this service, Lord. May it be pleasing to you. In your name we pray. Amen.